Hey guys, if you want to know what's the best decks to be playing at the moment, then stay tuned for this video. Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Since the last time I made a video, there's been quite a few changes, and when I logged into MTGArena yesterday, this is what I found in front of me. The biggest change that happened is the introduction of Kaladesh and Aether Revolt into the current standard, I would say. So there's quite a few big implications for this. The biggest, of course, are the fact that we now have actual real standard on MTGArena, something that we didn't have before. For anyone that's new to Magic or that might not know what that means, standard is basically the premier Magic format, and there's certain sets that are legal in that set during a set period, and outside of that, everything else is not standard legal. So the current sets that are legal are Dominaria, Rivals of Ixalan, Hour of Devastation, Amonkhet, Aether Revolt, and Kaladesh. And up until recently, we only had Dominaria till Amonkhet. So Kaladesh and Aether Revolt were never part of the equation. And that had a massive impact on what was happening on MTGArena compared to what is happening in the real Magic Paper world, the world of competitive Magic, because you couldn't play the strongest decks because not all of the cards were available. What happened to be true is the fact that Kaladesh and Aether Revolt had some of the most powerful cards in Standard, because these two sets were overall kind of thought of as a bit of a mistake, and there's a lot of cards that were banned out of these sets and so on. So, but still, the cards that remain are some of the most iconic of the current standard. And finally, we are getting our hands, or we have our hands in a lot of cases, on these cards already. So along with these two new sets that we got in with the most recent update, we also got something very interesting, and that is called Competitive Constructed. And you guys are probably familiar to people playing MTGArena that Quick Constructed is something we've had for a while, and Competitive Constructed is new. And the biggest difference between these two is the fact that Competitive Constructed is best out of 3 when you're playing one match, where Quick Constructed was a bit more like Hearthstone. You play against an opponent, one game, and it's over. And the biggest problem with this for Magic players in general is the fact that Magic isn't designed to be a one-turn game. So you don't just play your opponent for one turn and then either defeat him or lose. And that's why a lot of the matches that were played on Quick Constructed, and a lot of the complaints that people had of MTGArena, was the fact that people, sometimes in Magic, there's big variance with lands and stuff. You don't make land drops, or you don't get mana every turn like you do in something like Hearthstone. So sometimes you just don't draw lands, and variance is against you. And as a result, you just lose to your deck. And that's part of Magic, but that's also why we tend to play best out of 3 games instead of just a single game. So if Competitive Constructed, we finally have that structure of the 3 best out of 3 rather mode. And along with that came something else that's kind of important and iconic to Magic, is the sideboard. And for you guys that are not familiar, sideboarding is kind of, you have your main deck, which consists of 60 cards, and then you have an extra 15 cards on the side. And these are these you can bring in after the first game. So either you won or lost, and then you have some specific cards that you chose beforehand that are good against specific matchups. So for instance, if I were playing a blue-white deck, up until now I would play against a red deck, probably get decimated and just lose the game. But what happens is, now I might lose the first game, then I go to my sideboard, I pick a few tools that are really good against red decks, that maybe gain me life, that maybe wipes the board, things that I can't play because of other matchups. And now I can put those in, and it makes my win percentage that much higher. So finally we have what is essentially actual real Magic on MTGArena. So that's kind of important. Okay, let's look at our first deck on the list, and coming in at our number 3 spot, we have Blue-Green Steely Stompy. So this is a slight variation on a list that should look very familiar to anyone that's been playing MTGArena basically since it came online. So this list was piloted to a top 16 finish by Niels Alexa Tellerov. So the biggest addition is the addition of blue mana, and we're gonna look in a bit more detail in a second why is he adding blue to this very staple looking list that we are more familiar with. So essentially what the deck wants to do, the main game plan, is it wants to cast elves on turn 1. Turn 2, it wants to play a Steel Leaf champion, and hopefully your opponent doesn't have an answer, and usually you just win the game from there. Otherwise, it wants to put in a bunch of big threats and cast Ghalta for hopefully 2 mana. And essentially it just wants to beat face until your opponent is dead. It also makes use of vehicles, stuff like Heart of Kiran is in there, and some of them even play Aether Sphere Harvester to kind of gain some life against the aggressive decks and have a reliable blocker. And for this we use a variety of green-blue lands like Botanical Sanctum and Hinterland Harbor. Then main board, we also have Commit. So Commit to Memory, it's basically a way to deal with Hazoret and other annoying things that green doesn't really have a way to deal with normally. And in the sideboard, you guys will see we have a few other blue spells like River's Rebuke and some counter magic. So the blue is essentially there for a bit of utility. Let's move on to our deck number 2. Coming in second place is White-Blue Teferi, or White-Blue Control. This is also a deck that's been fairly prominent on MTGArena, something people have been playing with and that people should be aware of. I think up until now, especially before Teferi was introduced, but for the most part, when you see control lists on MTGArena up until now, they were usually approach of the second sun lists, where that is the primary win condition. And in the list that we find in our top 8 of the Pro Tour, you'll see that there is no obvious win condition aside from the one creature in the sideboard, Torrential Gearhulk. But otherwise, there's nothing that really finishes the game aside from Teferi himself. So this is a pure control deck that's built completely around Teferi. So as you guys can see, we have the usual package of card draw in the form of Search of Azcanta, and we have Essence Scatter and cards like this. Essence Scatter, Disallow, blue counter magic that we all know and love. And then of course the centerpiece is Teferi. It gives you card draw, it gets rid of stuff, and this put target non-land permanent onto its owner's library. Third from the top is actually the main win condition of this deck, because they would just end up rebouncing Teferi and essentially mill out their opponent by painfully slow card draw. That's the main way how this deck wins, and this ability stops them from milling themselves. Then we also see the usual package of Sealaways, get rid of attacking creatures. This is a way to kind of maintain your health total until the late game, where you just kind of take over with all your value. And then Fumigate and Settle the Wreckage is the same thing, just a way to gain life, get rid of annoying attacking creatures, slow down the aggressive decks. And as we'll see in our third deck, this is very necessary, and these 2 cards is the only reason why this deck is even featured in the top 16 at all. And in our final deck, or actually the final list is kind of 2 decks, and this is the red aggressive deck. Okay, and the list that I have featured here is the black-red variation, although there is a red variation that actually won the Pro Tour, and this is list is very similar to the one I have in front of me here. It's just a little faster, a little more aggressive. It doesn't have black for kind of utility and so on. But the majority of the top 8 was black-red aggro. I think there was one mono-red list that won, and there was one white-blue list that came 8th, I think, and everything else was a variation of this black-red aggressive list. So clearly this was the list that was identified as being the best deck. And the reason to play black is it gives the list a bit more, where the red deck is very aggressive, it just beats face until it runs out of gas or wins. This one can play a bit more of a mid-range game. Let's have a look at the cards quickly, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Bomat Courier and of course Goblin Chain Whirler kind of took centerpiece. There was an insane amount of Goblin Chain Whirlers in the top 8. I think it was something like 28 Goblin Chain Whirlers in the top 8 alone. That's pretty insane, and there's a good reason for this. This card is very good in terms of first strike and doing damage and just being a good buddy, but at the same time it pairs well with Soulscar Mage, and that this damage that it does to all other creatures, that 1 damage, when you have Soulscar Mage out, it actually deals that it doesn't deal that damage to your opponent's creatures, but it actually puts -1/-1 counters on them, so it actually permanently nerfs their creatures. So that's a bit of an insane interaction, and absolutely one of the reasons it's played. The other reason is it deals with stuff like Llanowar elves and other aggressive decks that you're maybe playing against. It slows down ramp decks. This card just does so much. And then, of course, Scrappy, one of the reasons to play black. This is just a very hard to deal with threat that just keeps on coming back. And also, it's a good pilot for the vehicles that you have in your deck. Then, similar to the red deck, the main win conditions are still Hazoret. You want to try and be as aggressive as possible, beat your opponent in the face, and Hazoret usually comes down on turn 4 or 5 and finish the job. Similar with Chandra, her +1 is very similar to that of Hazoret. She comes in, she gives you mana, she deals damage, she takes care of annoying creatures. That's her +1, her +1, and her -3. She doesn't usually ultimate, but her ultimate is also devastating if that actually goes off. So either way, she's something that your opponent has to deal with. Either they have to kill her or they get killed by her. And lastly, another reason to play black, or at least an example of it. Here we have our destroy creature, and this is essentially destroy target creature and deals 3 damage to your opponent. Deck list plays a lot of vehicles, a lot of artifacts, Scrap Heap Scoundrels, Heart of Kirans, and so on. And this is just a lot of damage. It's a removal and a burn to the face, exactly what this deck is looking to do. So guys, if you're interested in any of these lists and you want to go and try them out on MTGArena, you'll find that the link to the lists are below, and I uploaded it onto a new site called EtherHub, and I believe you can actually export them directly into MTGArena. I haven't done it myself, but that's something you guys can maybe make use of. Yeah, if you let me know in the comments what you think about the list. What do you think have been missing? 2 honorable mentions that I can maybe talk about is the green-black Constrictor list and the white-black Knights list. That's kind of more like a controlish kind of list. Those are 2. If this was the top 5, I would have definitely included those 2 lists as well. They're pretty good. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and let me know why. If you want a bit more of an in-depth look at any of these lists, let me know in the comments, and I can maybe do kind of a full-on deck tech of 1 or 2 of these lists, if that's something you guys are looking forward to. I'm going to be playing the blue-green Stompy list as well, and I'll put up a video of that, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, subscribe if you want to get notifications. And I'll see you guys next time.